All right, so welcome back. Today is going to be research methods. One of the integral characteristics of the MBA program that we run here is that the interest of the program is not only to introduce you to the theories of economics and HR, etc. A very critical component of the program is to introduce you to research methods and to actually help you to imbibe. Why are you laughing? And to actually help you to imbibe the skills and knowledge in conducting research. So it's going to be a blend of both. Okay. So it's going to be a blend of not just the theory and that of the industry experience, but as well research methods. So we want it to be the case that by the close of the program, as a student of our MBA program, you should have at least some reasonable or adequate research skills and knowledge, and should be able to conduct independent research all by yourself without necessarily seeking any help from anybody. And so for those, we encourage you to invest again your interest in this particular course, research methods. It's very important because the key ingredient of our MBA program that makes our MBA program a special one from other MBA programs elsewhere. Elsewhere, the emphasis of their MBA programs has often been on equipping the students with the knowledge and skills in the various areas that they were taking them through, the various courses, and then also allowing them to have some industry experience by bringing on board industry experts to come and interact with the students. And that is always what they emphasize on. We have gone a little bit further to add research skills or research methods to your training to make sure that you do not only get the theories, you get the industry experience, and then as well as the research skills or method, research knowledge that you require to conduct independent and effective research. So please, let this course be one of your interest courses that you actually pay serious attention to in order to equip yourself with the knowledge and skills of research methods. I think that will really help us. So as I said, I'm standing in today for Prof. And I understand that last week you looked at ethics in business as well as in research methods. And normally when we talk about ethics, we are just looking at the behavioral traits of an individual, whether those behavioral traits are good or are bad. So in particular, in looking at ethics in research, I believe strongly that both we are taking you through the ethical obligations of a participant in a research process, as well as the ethical obligations of the researcher himself. For instance, the researcher himself, in conducting any research, must make sure that there is an informed consent on the part of the participant that he is interviewing in that particular research process. Say that the participant must inform the researcher by consenting to participate in the research process. And that is an ethical behavior that a researcher must observe in conducting that particular research. The researcher must also ensure that there is no harm caused to the participants. In some studies where, especially in experimental studies, where a particular, say, drug, okay, or product is being introduced in the research process, the researcher must make sure that in taking that particular drug as a participant in that research, you are not exposed to any form of what? Harm. That is another ethical obligation the researcher must make sure that he observes in the research process. He must ensure that there is privacy in the information that you are giving to him. He must ensure that there is what? Confidentiality. He must not divulge the information or the data that you have given to him as a researcher. On the part of the participants, when you are participating in the research as a participant, you must also have some certain ethical obligations you have to observe. One of them is that you have to be honest. If the researcher asks you how much you earn per month, and you earn 2,000, let it be 2,000. Don't tell the researcher you earn 5,000, just to make him feel good. That dishonesty will not allow the research process to be carried out in an environment of honesty. So in the end, the data that was collected will be misinformed decision making. And also, as a participant in the research process, another ethical obligation is that you must, when you decide to participate, you must faithfully and fully participate in the process. Okay? Not to start the process and along the line you tell the researcher that you are fed up with the questions and so you are no longer interested in participating in the research, and then you truncate the research process at that point. No. Once you agree by signing the informed consent to participate in the research as a participant, you must make sure that you carry through to the end and not to stop halfway and tell the researcher you are no longer interested. Of course, the researcher will have given you that right to drop out of the study along the line when you feel that at this particular point you are no longer interested in being part of the study. But if you know that you cannot be in the study or the research process up to the end, then you shouldn't get started at all. All right, so those were some of the issues that were discussed in the last week's lecture on ethics in business as well as in research methods. Today, we want to shift our attention a little bit to defining research problems and then reviewing literature. One of the critical chapters that you write when you are conducting a study, especially for academic purpose, is the chapter on literature review. And that normally comes as your chapter 2. So it's a very critical chapter that you often write when you are conducting a research for academic purpose. Conducting a research for professional purposes sometimes may not necessarily require you to have a chapter on literature review, even though it is so important to do some review of the literature. But to start, we should keep in our minds that when we talk about research or in trying to gather research ideas to see where to start from, research ideas normally emanate from 4 P's. We call them 4 P's. It emanates from problems, emanates from places, people, and has to do with phenomena. So any research that we intend to carry out, and then like that, you frame your research topic. Your research topic must at least capture 2 of these P's, 4 P's. Your research topic must either have to do with phenomena and problems, or people and problems, or places and problems, or places, problems, and phenomena. At least 2 of the 4 P's must be captured in your research topic. Now, when you think about your research topic or trying to see whether you can hazard some guesses around the research ideas that you want to frame your research topic from, you should understand that you will be motivated perhaps by a particular problem that is existing in a particular community that your research wants to unveil certain information about that particular problem. And so normally the research process starts with the problem. Why are you conducting the research? What is your motivation for conducting the research? And that often is your research problem. Now, the research problem is a part of what you write in your chapter 1. However, normally the chapter 1, even though it is your chapter 1, normally ends up to be the last chapter that you write. Why? Because as the research process, you come out chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so, yes, the research problem is very important. From the outset, you should be able to understand the problem that is motivating your research. But you shouldn't be too hard on yourself and say that it's a must, you must write the chapter 1 effectively before you proceed to the other chapters. Just keep in mind that, yes, you may have to at least just sketch something as your research problem, but don't be so worried about how effective that research problem is for a moment. If you want to force to write an effective research problem right from the onset of your research, chances are high that you are going to write a research problem that is not good enough. And when your research problem is not good enough, What it means is that the research questions that normally emanate from your research problem will not be sound. And when your research questions are not sound, your research objectives will not also be sound. And the research methods and design that will follow to help you carry out the study in order to achieve those unsound research objectives will all not be what? Effective. And so in the end, your research will produce an outcome that does not reflect the reality on the what? On the ground. And so we always encourage you, even though yes, you have to understand the problem that is motivating your study, but let that chapter be the last chapter that you come back to when you are done writing chapter 2, 3, 4, and what? And 5. Normally we have 5 chapters. How then do you proceed? To write an effective research problem will require you to do some little bit of background investigation into the literature. You have to go back to the literature to read previous works that are relevant and related to the topic that you are studying. By doing so, it will help you to write your research problem better because you have gone through how similar studies by other authors have written their research problem. And so by looking at that, you can effectively write your research problem. And by reviewing the literature, it will also allow you to frame research questions and objectives that are very effective. At least you will have gone through how others have also done it. And so it will help you to do yours better. By reviewing the literature, you come across the type of data that people use to analyze when they study topics that are similar to yours. And that can also tell you where to get that particular data to study your research topic. The video will also help you to know the type of data analysis to do in your research, because reviewing similar studies will have given you ideas about how previous authors have also done their data analysis. And by looking at what they have done, you can also replicate the same thing in your research study. And so by that, we are emphasizing the importance of doing literature review, even from the onset when you select a research topic to study. It's very important you do literature review. So today we are looking at defining the research problem and reviewing the literature. And so we want to ensure that by the course of the lectures today, our lecture will have helped us achieve these learning outcomes. So we want to ensure that by the course of today, you should have been able to develop the ability to identify the characteristics of a quality research topic. How do you know that this research topic is a quality research topic? So when you are writing your MBA dissertation, you frame very quality research topics. You should be able to develop the capacity to describe how to convert research ideas into research questions. Very, very important. Understand what literature review is. And not just understand what literature review is, but how it helps your research. In brief, I've already summarized how literature review can help your research. Help your research and define the problem very well. Help your research to shape your research questions very well. Help your research to identify the various statistical methods or various data analysis methods that you can use in your study to also do your data analysis. And by the grace of today, you should also be able to identify the major sources of literature search. If you want to go through the literature review process, first of all, you have to search for the literature before you can think about reviewing the literature. So where do you get the literature? So by the close of today, you should be able to identify various sources that you can get your literature from. Then we will explain how to plan and write a literature review. You must let that process be systematic. So first of all, you have to harvest or gather your literature and then follow through certain steps in order to write an effective literature review chapter. And then lastly, you want to ensure that you want to confirm your research questions with that of the literature review. So basically, these are what we are setting ourselves out to achieve by the close of today. We have already indicated that quality research topics are topics that actually address problems. In other words, they address gaps in existing knowledge that currently inhibits informed decision making. As a manager of a firm, if you want to make certain decisions, but unfortunately you do not have the knowledge, okay, on some of the issues on which we are supposed to make decisions, then it means there is a gap in your knowledge. Okay, so a quality research topic should seek to close that particular gap in your knowledge by providing you with the knowledge that is required to make your effective managerial decisions. So effective managerial decisions can also be made not by our business economics alone, but of course by our sound understanding of what of research. And so quality research topics should seek to help us close the gaps, the knowledge gaps that managers or government or policymakers often face when they want to make decisions without understanding of the issues on which those decisions are supposed to be made. For instance, the decision to implement free senior high school. Some were contesting the implementation of the free senior high school, and the government was bent on implementing that particular policy. Those critics were saying that the country was spending so much on the free senior high school, and that was true. It was true then, and it remains true today. The problem is so the critics were advising the government to make the implementation a little bit more of targeting than the wholesale implementation of the policy. Instead of targeting everybody, target those who cannot pay. Question is, how many cannot pay? How many can pay half? How many can pay full? And how many cannot pay at all? That is a knowledge gap. And so when you are framing a research topic, your research topic should seek to close some of these knowledge gaps, either in business or in governance or in whatever area that you are doing your research. So let's take some time to look at characteristics of a quality research topic. In framing our quality research topic, we must make sure that the research is developed from a theoretical base. Normally, your research topic can emanate or can be developed from a theory. For instance, we have several theories depending upon your product. In marketing, in HR, in finance, there are several theories. And so, for instance, in finance, we have the efficient market hypothesis theory. And so you can develop your research topic from that particular theory to actually test the Ghana stock market to find out whether the efficient market hypothesis is applicable to the Ghana stock market in the buying and selling of securities on the market. Somebody may also be looking at how social networks and workplaces can influence employees' adoption of a particular technology that has been introduced by the management of that particular organization. In that particular context, you may want to use a theory known as social learning theory. So the research or develop from that particular theory. And in that sense, you want to look at the research topic like assessing the effects or the impact of social networks on the adoption of XYZ technology among employees of, say, UDS. And so in that case, it means your research topic is a quality research topic because it emanates from a sound theoretical base. So research is of interest to the sponsor and the researcher. Research topic is deemed to be of high quality when you frame the topic in a way that it is of interest to you, the researcher, especially when you are conducting the research for academic purposes. So in your second year, all of us here will be asked to write our MBA dissertation. And in doing so, the topic that we select should be a quality topic. And how do we measure that? When that particular topic is of interest to you, the researcher, then we say that it's a quality research topic. Sometimes organizations want people to conduct research for them. And so they invite you as a researcher in this class, and they just throw to you some research desires that the organization wants to conduct. It is therefore the responsibility of you, the researcher, to frame the research topic from the ideas that they have thrown to you. Okay? And so when you do so to fulfill the interest of the scholar who wants you to conduct the research for him, then we deem that to be a high quality research topic. 2 years ago, we had a project where we were tasked to do some research for one civil society organization. So when we applied, we won the grant. They just told us, oh, they wanted to do a research on digital security issues, okay, concerning civil society organizations. So we have to take those research ideas that they decided to throw to us and frame the research topic from that. And so our research topic was framed to serve the interests of the organization, in this case, which was the what? The sponsor of the research. Research problem is well defined, and the research questions and objectives that flow from it are specific and possible to address through rigorous what? Research design. Any research topic that you frame can be deemed to be of high quality when it is easy for us to frame our research problem from that particular topic. And the research questions and objectives can easily flow from the research problem we have developed based on that particular topic. And not just flow from that particular research problem, but it is also possible for us to achieve those objectives through the research work design. In that case, if your research topic is able to allow you to do this, then we say that your research topic is of high what? Quality. It allows you to frame your research problem, allows you to what? To design or develop your research questions and problems from the research questions and objectives from the problem, and further allows you to do develop a research design in order to what? Achieve your research objectives. In that sense, we say that your research topic is of high what? High quality. Yes. Come again? Yes. So when you take a research problem of any study, even without looking at the research questions and objectives, as an experienced researcher, you should always see certain objectives or questions that that particular researcher may be interested in. And sometimes you will not even surprise you to still go to the next heading, only to realize that what you anticipated will be the research questions are actually the what? The research questions the researcher is seeking to answer. And so from the research problem, we should be clear the kind of research questions that your study wants to address. So in that sense, we say your research questions are flowing from your research problem. Then resource requirements in terms of time, finance, data access are well understood early in the research process. You also need the research topic to be of high quality when right from day one in framing that research topic, you know from day one the requirements in terms of time, finance, in order to undertake that particular research, and whether it is even feasible or possible for you to have access to certain data that you will require to do your work, to do your research. If you don't take this into consideration right from the onset of the research process, then it means your research topic is not of high worth, of high quality. We have cases where people start the research process and assure their supervisors that, oh, we have data to conduct our research. We are looking for, we will have secondary data to conduct our research. Only to get to the point of data analysis, and they realize their access to the data is not readily available. They are asked to pay money to have access to the data that they cannot afford to pay. In that sense, that research topic is not a quality research topic. You should know right from day one the data that you require to do that research. You should be certain that that data is available. If you are using private data, you should be certain that those you are going to collect the data from are there. And you know that when the time is due for you to collect your data from them for the analysis, they are going to be readily available for you to collect your data. If these considerations are not made, then it means your research problem is not, your research topic is not a high quality research topic. Research is expected to make a contribution to knowledge independently of the orientation of the findings. When you do your research work in your final year of the MBA program, we expect that your research will make some contribution towards to knowledge. Remember that high quality research topics are topics that tend to close knowledge gaps. And so at the end of your program, the research that you conduct should be seeking to close or make some contributions to knowledge. And we are saying this contribution to knowledge should be independent of the orientation of the what of the findings. In other words, if your research was seeking to look at the factors that influence the performance of UDS staff, for instance, and you know that motivation is one of the determinants of performance. Only for your study to say that motivation is not a determinant of what? Staff performance. That is contrary to what is widely expected. We are saying that that should not prevent you from getting your MBA. What you have found is that motivation does not affect performance. That is your research outcome. And so that should be independent from getting your MBA what? MBA certificate. So we are saying that your research should make contributions to knowledge. However, in making that contribution to knowledge, it should be independent of the orientation of your what? Of your findings. Your MBA expects you to make contribution to knowledge through your research in second year. You have done that. And so you are due for your certificate. Whether that knowledge is contrary or consistent with what people believe, it shouldn't be a problem for you in terms of you getting your MBA what? Your MBA certificate. Now let's shift to look at identifying research ideas and topics. How do we come about? Yes. Yes, of course. It's not a must that your research must address all these requirements before it becomes a quality research topic. If you check through certain research articles, you will find out that some will conduct research and even publish it in high impact journals. And those research articles are not based on any sound theoretical theory. You go to the theory that they are seeking to test. And yet, it's a quality research topic. Okay? And so all this must not necessarily be what we need before we deem your research topic as a high quality research topic. Once a number of them are satisfied by your research topic, you are good to start. Okay. So we are saying that you can frame your research, your quality research topic from a theory. Okay, for instance, the example I gave, social learning theory, okay, or social network theory. This social learning theory says that as individual employees or peers on daily basis interact, they become social networks. Okay, so your friends, either at work, or at home, or wherever, as those clique of friends you at least normally interact with, you become social networks. And these networks are deemed as social networks because they represent the flow of information from one person to another, flow of resources, and flow of different forms of support. So there is this kind of flow that contains all these should I call them factors, okay, between you and your peers. Okay, you share information with your friends on daily basis. You share financial support, all manner of support with them. So you become a social network. Either these friends are at workplace or wherever. So let's assume that you want to look at how this social network can affect the employees' adoption of a particular technology that an organization has introduced. You want to find out, aside the orientation that the organization probably would have taken the staff through, whether they, at the staff level, whether their daily interactions can also influence them to accept and adopt that particular technology or not. You can conduct a study to do that. And that means your study is likely to emanate from a theory known as social learning theory. And so your study will be based on a sound theoretical ground. And that theory will be social learning Social learning theory. But you can also frame a quality research topic out of the context of a theory. And that will still be what? That will still be accepted. what might be unsound theories. Of course, the research interest must match the theory. Okay, so when you're conducting a study, a very important question. You cannot be conducting a study to look at the effect of social networks on employee, say, productivity or performance. We are talking about the social learning theory. That would be a mistake. So there are certain theories that you not necessarily was used when you are conducting certain types of work studies. So if you are conducting a study on the effect of social networks on employees' performance or adoption of a technology, then you go to employ efficient market hypothesis theory, which talks about how information flow in the market can affect the pricing of securities on the market. It doesn't match your study context. So we say that your research topic is not based on sound theoretical ground. And if you also frame a research topic without a theory, then it means your study or your topic is not on any sound theoretical base because you are not looking at any theory in your research. All right, thank you. Yes. 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 It is often necessary not to let your research topic be wordy. If it is too wordy, it makes it boring to read the topic, let alone read the content of that particular research. And so I think there is roughly an estimated number of words that must be captured in your research topic. Some are putting it around 16 to 18 words. Your research topic must not exceed, in terms of word count, 16 to 18 words. Once it exceeds this number, it becomes too long and perhaps too boring to read. And that can discourage people from reading your work, even though your work may be an excellent piece. All right. Identify research ideas. How do we come about research ideas? By questioning experienced researchers, executives, and decision makers about the problem that they face. When you sit with experienced researchers to have an interaction with them concerning certain issues of interest to their research, sometimes if you are quite observant, you can get a number of research topics from your interaction with those experienced researchers. They will have pointed to you certain areas that are yet to be to be researched in your interactions with them. And these areas will likely be your areas of interest in your MBA research in second year. And if you are also within an organizational setting, certain concerns raised by executives of your company can also generate certain research ideas for you to want to take them up further, to be able to go towards and build more information about those issues that are of interest to the executives of your company. Perhaps your director at workplace of late is complaining that the output of most of the staff is beginning to decline. And he complains about it day in, day out. And he complains not just about the output, but the fact that despite the motivational packages given to staff, the productivity levels of late are beginning to fall. So those concerns by those executives of that particular company can readily be a source of research idea for you to want to take it up, to investigate, to find out why in the face of high motivational packages, the employee's performance is so dwindling. Examining published research in fields of what? Interest. So if you are into finance and you look at published works around, let's say, market efficiency, you can be able to come out with areas that are so yet to be to research. And those areas can be your research. You can have your research ideas on topic from those areas. Examining past research projects that may suggest areas worthy of what? Subsequent investigation. When you take any academic research, or even an industry research outputs, and you read that particular article, at the tail end, normally they make certain suggestions as to areas for future what research. And so you can pick one of those areas and start your research from that particular point. Seminars, conferences, and workshops can also be areas where certain research ideas could be generated through seminar presentations and dialogue and discussions. As you participate in this fully with attentive ears, you can be able to at least gather some few research ideas and take it up to do your research. Call for papers and proposals. Sometimes journals send out calls inviting prospective researchers to conduct research on certain areas. So they will give their themes where your research must fit at least into one or two of those themes. Those calls can also generate some research interest to you. Then by observation, you yourself you have just observed that at your workplace, you have a number of Muslims and Christians, and the Muslims, they pray 5 times a day, and they don't miss their prayers. And the Christians also, your interaction with them indicates to you that they are very religious. They fast, they go to church every Sunday, some on Saturday, and you show that there is high level of religiosity at your workplace. Yet, you have observed that the storekeeper of your company is of late beginning to complain that most of the stock of the company are being stolen. That observation could generate a research idea for you to take it up. Why is it that in the midst of high level of religiosity among employees, the storekeeper is still having problems in adding up his stock? And so that can be a source of research idea. And so these are just examples of some research topics that a researcher may want to look at. For instance, an investigation into the level of organizational commitment among employees. A study of the antecedents of service quality proposed by prior researchers and how they manifest themselves in the company. Your research topic must not be complex. It should be easy for you to explain it to anybody to understand. It shouldn't be too complex. Sometimes, in our attempt to impress our readers, we frame research topics that are too complex. Your research topic must not be too complex. It must not also be too simple and require direct answers. Okay, when it is too simple and require direct answers, then there is no need for the research. Okay, then there is no need for the research. But what are acceptable research questions that we said must flow from your research your research topic? Those questions we must understand that they must not be too easy questions to answer. So easy questions are those that require descriptive answers. For instance, what is the average term of employment of staff of an organization? Or what are the sick leave statistics for a given company? The sick leave statistics will indicate that on the average, every year 5 people go on sick leave. And so if 5 people go on sick leave, that answers this particular research question. Then there's no need for the research. On average, how many people go on sick leave in your company? 5. Then the research ends there. So the research question must not be an easy question. Much as we say, it must not also be too complex. While the above questions, as I've already said, may be relevant to an investigation, especially regarding organizational commitment, they are not specific enough. So a more appropriate way to frame these questions would be to look at, to ask a question like, to what extent does organizational commitment correlate with incidents of sick leave? And perhaps to add that, does the length of service influence this relationship in any way? So in that case, okay, the color is one. Please, the card number 2713. 2713. It has blocked one of our lecturers since 2713. Perhaps he's in the exam hall, second year MBA students. Okay. All right, so let's look at the attributes of a good research topic. Attributes of a good research topic. Capability. Is your research topic feasible? Now, this is the topic something with which you are really fascinated about. Every research that you intend to carry out, you must be fascinated about that particular research. In other words, you must have some bit of interest in that particular research. Conducting a research is not an easy task. And so if from the onset you do not have interest in the research topic, then along the line, you will lose interest. And you will have it very difficult a time to complete the research process. Do you have or can you develop within the project time frame the necessary research skills to undertake that particular research topic? There are some research topics that you select which will require you to have certain data analysis skills, for instance. The question is, given the time frame that is allocated to you to conduct that research, will that time frame be enough for you to be able to develop these data analysis skills and be able to conduct that research within that time frame? If no, then that is not an attribute of a good research topic. Is the research topic achievable within the available time frame? For your thesis, your dissertation in the second year, I think it's 3 months or 6 months. Question is, if you pick a particular topic, can you work within that period to achieve that particular research that you are setting out to do? If no, then it means it is not a good research topic. Stop the current when you finish your project. If you pick a topic that is already extensively researched, and you are not careful, by the time you are done with the research, nobody is being interested in reading it again. And so in that case, that topic is not a good one. Is the research topic achievable within the financial resources that are available to you? Don't pick a topic that you do not have the finances to support. And so if you do so, your topic is not good. Are you reasonably certain of being able to gain access to data you are likely to use in carrying out your research? If the data source to carry out your research is not certain, that is not a good topic. In talking about good research topics, we also look at appropriateness. Is it worthwhile conducting that particular research? And by that, we mean that the topic fits the specifications and meets the standard of the examining institution. UDS has a template or a guideline for the dissertation that you write in your second year. And so if your topic does not meet, or your research does not meet the specifications outlined within the guidelines, then it is not a good research topic. Does your research topic contain issues that have a clear link to theory? Normally, we encourage students to develop research topics from theories. It makes your work standard. It makes your work more informative as you are going to work in the confines of a theory to see whether that particular theory applies to your study area or not. But if you work without a theory, it's more or less like working on a topic in a vacuum. You do not have enough. You do not have enough parameters to the findings of your study. But if you are working within a theory, at the end of the day, when you do your data analysis, you can easily do the interpretation with respect to that particular theory. And so we encourage you to do so, to choose topics that are derived from what? From sound theoretical basis. Are you able to state your research questions and objectives clearly? If not, then your topic is not a good one. We will propose the research to be able to provide fresh insight into this topic. Some areas, for instance, in Asia, people have looked at the effect of motivation on employee job satisfaction, on employee performance, so much that if you take a topic around these areas, it's now boring. And so that topic may not be a good research topic, because we will not be able to provide fresh insights into the existing knowledge on the area. Does your research topic relate clearly to the idea you have been given, perhaps by an organization? If an organization asks you to conduct a study for them, and you frame a topic that does not match the interest of that particular research you are asked to do, then it's not a good one research topic. Are the findings for this research topic likely to be symmetrical? In other words, of similar value, whatever the outcome. When you conduct a study, you are not certain about the outcome. The outcome could be negative or it could be what? It could be positive. And so the findings of your research topic should be symmetrical, meaning that it could be what you expect or what you did what you didn't expect. Okay. Does the research topic match your career goals? So if you are an HR, a head of an HR unit somewhere in a particular organization, you may want to make sure that the HR program that you are doing here, you do a topic that is relevant to your career what, your career development or career goals. How do we do literature review? So literature review normally has certain objectives. And so before we do the literature review itself, we must understand the objectives of that particular literature review process. And maybe this are two. The first is that it helps us develop and expand our research ideas. So initially we are thinking about the research problem in a particular context. Having gone through about 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 articles, those articles will expand your understanding on these research ideas that you initially imagined. And so that's the first objective of a research, a literature review. So it ensures you are familiar with recent developments and have a complete understanding of relevant topics. The more you read literature on a topic that you are going to work on, the more you get to understand better that particular topic. And the more it exposes you to understand the recent development around that particular topic, so that we will not be going to be a trend and not to frame topics within that particular area that are forgotten. Okay, so the review seeks to achieve a certain objective of making you familiar with recent development in your area of research interest. So this diagram, a beautiful one, summarizes the literature review process for us. It tells us what literature review is, why it is so important that we do it, and how we can end up doing an effective literature review. So we have our literature review here. Okay. So what is literature review? It consists of investigation of your research topic, a process, systematic review. And this process of systematic review includes identifying your keywords, the keywords in your research topic. So we are looking at the impact of social networks on employee performance. The key variables in your research topic will be social networks, employee performance. So this literature review that will help you to identify the keywords used in your research. And these keywords are going to be used to search for existing literature on them. Okay, so it will help you in your literature research. Followed by evaluating the search results. Those keywords will allow you to delete or remove certain articles that probably you have downloaded to read that are not related to your to your research topic. So it helps you to do an evaluation of your research results. Helps you to document the findings you are getting from the review of the literature. Then to create an integrated analysis of what is already known about your topic. Why literature review? Literature review, it defines your research research problem. It helps you establish credibility and significance. It informs your research persistence, your research design, and then the development of your hypothesis, the operationalization of the key variables in your research, data collection tools that your research can also what can also adopt, and how your research can also do is what data analysis. And the research design is also very useful in telling you the research methods to use. Okay, and these research methods to use are very important because without the research method, you cannot achieve your research work, your research objectives. Now, we are saying that identifying keywords in your research is what the literature review process will help you to do. And if you identify these keywords in your research topic, it helps you to frame your research questions very well. So if your research has to do with the impact of social networks on employee performance, then your research questions must be questions that are related to those keywords, networks and what? Employee performance. So it helps you to develop your research what? Questions. And these keywords are also related to concepts and theories that your research is seeking to test. If you are looking at social networks, there are some components of social networks that your research must be interested in. And so we have certain concepts embedded in your research, your theory. That is the basis on which your research is built. Your research is built. Then if you also search for the existing literature, it consists of previous what? Previous studies. And these previous studies may be conceptual studies, maybe empirical studies, and maybe older studies. Conceptual studies are normally qualitative or qualitative studies, but empirical studies could either be qualitative studies or quantitative what? Studies. And these articles may be old or more recent. Literature review process will also help us to search for existing what? Literature. Searching for the existing literature, we have to know that, okay, we have secondary data what? Sources that we can also rely on to conduct our research. And these secondary data sources are found in electronic databases. So for instance, we have the World Development Indicators, and those doing finance may find it very necessary as a secondary data source. And this can be accessed from the library or from online sources. After searching for the literature, we often follow that by evaluating the search what? The search results. Why evaluate the search results of your literature that you have downloaded or searched for? Is to help you only concentrate on relevant literature that are related to your what? Your work. Concentrate on the quality papers that are relevant to your work and allow you to identify gaps in the papers or literature that you have downloaded. So that constitutes the evaluation set of your literature results. And it also helps you to arrive at the consensus or the disagreement authors have put forward in their research papers. We said that the literature review process also helps us to document our findings from the literature that we have downloaded. And by documenting our findings, we can do so by taking notes. This paper said this, by summarizing what each paper has concluded on regarding your research topic. By taking notes, which makes mind mapping. And by referencing, using various citations to bring a bibliography or avoid plagiarism. So that is basically a summary of the literature review process. It tells us what literature review is, tells us why it is important and how we can do our literature review. Literature reviews often are in two stages. Okay. The first stage is that literature review is for us to identify certain things and trends, as well as certain relationships between our of interest or our research topic. So that is normally the first stage of our literature review. So the end result of this first stage of the literature review process is to help us generate certain ideas that are very related to our research topic that have not yet been researched in the past or have been research, but using different words, different methods from the methods that we want to use. So that's the first part of the literature review process. To go to the literature and identify certain interesting themes, trends, as well as the nature of certain relationships between your interest was via the social network and employee was performance. Is it negative? Is it positive? Are they not related at all? Through the first stage of the initial review process will allow us to understand all these dynamics. The second stage of the initial review process is much more extensive. This is actually the point where you begin to focus on identifying and describing the past theoretical research that is related to your what? To your study. So you go through the papers one after the other to see how each of the papers is related to your what? To your research topic. And here it tells you that you have to have certain topics under your literature review session where you look at each article's was contribution to each of those was relevant topics under your literature review literature review session. So for instance, if you are looking at the social networks effect on employee performance, in your literature review session or chapter, you must define what social networks is. You must define what employee performance is. You must look at the factors influencing employees' what performance. And so when you have these subtopics under your literature review chapter, and you try to see how each of the articles that you have downloaded or gathered to do your literature review contributes to each of these headings under your literature review chapter, then that means you are on the second stage of your literature review process. So you realize that it's going to be more extensive. Yeah, more time. Steps to conduct literature review. Steps to conduct literature review. So these are the various steps that you can use when we are conducting or not for conducting a literature review. First is to clarify your research questions and objectives. Your research questions and objectives are the foundation of your research. So in doing the literature review, you must make sure that they are very, very clear because the literature review will be built on the research questions and objectives. We have to locate and evaluate the various sources of literature that we think are relevant to our research topic and start collecting those literature by downloading them on your computer, and then you download these articles and put them inside that particular folder. So you start collecting the literature and make record of the information. See which of the articles is more relevant than which other article. Then you now start writing the initial literature review. Then identify the gaps that various literature articles have left. Then you examine your research questions and objectives again to see whether those research questions and objectives have already been achieved in previous studies or not. Then you collect additional literature to fill the gaps that you have identified from the literature. If there are still some gaps left, then those remaining gaps then become the gaps that your study wants to close. And so you prepare your final literature review document. Why do we do literature review? It helps us to, we have already mentioned this, to define our research problem clearly, as well as our research questions. It gives us some background information that we need to understand on certain major issues regarding our research topic. It suggests certain potential hypotheses that our research topic can develop in order to test in the course of the research. It identifies research methods and analysis approaches that previous authors have used that we can also use in the analysis of our research data. It gives us some guidelines on the interpretation approaches used by previous authors so that we can also do our interpretation of results in a similar manner. It suggests applicable theories that our research topic can emanate from. So doing research review helps us to achieve the following. Now, when you start the research process, you are assigned a supervisor, and in your case, your final research report will not go for external examination. But those doing M4 and then PhD, their research reports will go for external examination. Now, we want to look at a risk profile of the research topic that you have selected, in the sense of whether an external examiner is likely to reject your research or likely to what? To accept your research. If your research, so let's look at these four quadrants. If your research your research topic is venturing into a new field of study, and at the same time, you are using a new method, research method, let's say a new data analysis method, an issue that is generally new, a new field of study, then there's a high risk of your examiner rejecting your what? Rejecting your research. However, if you use an old research method to study a new field of interest, then it should produce satisfactory results that your examiner may not reject your research. If the area of your topic is an old field of study, and you are using a new research method to do that, conduct that study, then there's a chance your research should produce a satisfactory result, so the examiner will not reject it. If the area of your study is old, and you are also using an old method of research method, let's say old data analysis method, maybe it may be of little value. The research reports that you generate may be of little value and not value of what? A degree. So the examiner may as well reject your research. In other words, fail your research thesis or dissertation. Where can we get literature to conduct our literature review? From books. So we have so many textbooks, and these textbooks, they do not only explain theories. Sometimes they also bring in certain empirical literature to back a theory that they explain in those books. So we can rely on books. Just as some of the books are old, and so when they are old, the literature in them are also old, and may not be quite relevant to a recent study. We can also rely on journals and data conference proceedings to get relevant research articles to do our research. We can rely on government and industry reports. So government agencies like the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, etc. There are those governmental agencies that we can rely on to download certain research reports to help us do our literature review. Of course, you are not the first person to do a thesis or a dissertation, so you can rely on previous theses and dissertations to get more information to do your literature review. As well, you can rely on electronic databases like Scopus, Web of Science, Emerald, etc. to download research articles for your research. You can also rely on internet searches like Google and Google Scholar, ChatGPT. Then you have to be careful how you use these AI tools. There's a smart way to use them. Don't ask it to run the entire research report for you. You can use it in a different way. Now, in doing the literature review, there are some guidelines for planning our literature search. When you are doing a literature search, if you are looking at impact of social networks on performance, the literature search should be centered on networks and performance. So if you're also looking at leadership, conflict management, your literature search should be emphasizing only on these keywords. Now, which disciplines must be examined? When you are conducting a study in your second year on the program, if you are doing finance, your research should be in finance. If you are doing marketing, should be in marketing. Identify the context of your research. Are you looking at a problem that a business faces or a problem that customers face? So the context of your study has to be what? Has to be clear. Perhaps you may want to look at the perceptions of service quality among employees of VRA Tamale. In that case, your topic has to do with what? The customers of what? Of VRA. In terms of what their perceptions are of the service quality of VRA. Decide on what geographical area your study is concentrating on. Are you looking at that of Tamale or Ghana? or Kumasi or Boka, your research geographical setting has to be very clear. Or you are looking at Africa, okay, your research has to be very clear. What time period will be examined? At minimum, sense is 10 years, but likely a quick review of at least 20 years. However, some research supervisors will ask you not to use literature that is more than 5 years old. So in that case, all the literature that you want to use in your research must not be more than 5 years. Some may accept up to 10 years, even though some may accept up to 20 years. But the argument behind accepting recent literature in your literature review process is that it allows you, the researcher, to understand recent developments and recent interest areas within that particular field. But you go to literature on articles that are 20 years old, they are very old and may not be they may not be raising issues that are of recent relevance. Identify the language relevant research is likely to be published in, and that you will be able to either read yourself or have it translated. When you are searching for literature, the language is very important. Are you looking for only English related literature, or you don't care about the language, or you are looking for only French and English? You have to make that has to be made clear as well. Beyond the books and scholarly articles that you may rely on to do your literature review, you have to also identify which other sources will be of relevance for you to examine. You can look at conference proceedings, you can also look at industry publications and so on. So we have other areas, other publications relating to finance, marketing. So you have Bloomberg News, for instance, those who are into finance. You may rely on Bloomberg News to gather finance-related articles to do your literature review, aside the books and that of scholarly articles or journals in finance that you may want to look at. Yes.
The student is asking, can interviews and observations be classified as sources of literature review?
So interviews and observations are sources of data. Interviews and what? Observations. So literature review is different from data analysis. Okay. So literature review is different from somebody asking a question whether interviews and data observations can be used for literature review. No. We review literature by reviewing previous studies. So you look for previous articles that are relevant and related to your topic and go through them to review them. But in terms of interviews and observations, if you want to collect primary data in your research for analysis, then you can use those for your sources of data collection. And that is when you are dealing with primary data. Okay. Further guidelines for preparing a literature review. We start from a broad perspective and move down to a narrow one that focuses on your specific topic. And this is what we often refer to as the funnel approach. So normally when you start the literature review process, you have to start from a broader perspective and finally narrow it down to your key variables of interest to your research topic. So even though you are looking at the relationship between social networks and employee performance, you can start by looking at general factors that influence employee performance before finally moving down to look at specifically the relationship between social networks and employee performance. When you realize that previous authors may have said it is positive, others may have said it is what? Negative and all that. So you have to do what we call use the funnel approach to do your literature review. Yes. Yes. So the research, you can conduct the research when you employ two theories. And these two theories must be related to your research objectives. So for instance, your research objective 1 requires you to use theory A. Research objective 2 requires you to use theory B. You can do that. You can also have a case where one theory can satisfy all your research works, research objectives, and that is also accepted. One theory can be used to satisfy or achieve all your research. Let's say you have four research objectives. You can find that one theory can be enough for the four. In that case, use just one theory. You can also realize that the first two theory objectives can be achieved using theory X, and then the next two can be achieved using theory what? Y. In that case, you have to employ theory X and what? Theory Y. Yes. All research. Yes. All research. No. So based on the area in finance you are doing your study, if you have to do is how efficient financial markets are, then you cannot run away from using efficient market hypothesis as your theory. But if your study has been to do with how efficient financial markets are, then there is no point using efficient market hypothesis as your theoretical base. All right, your review should also be closely related to your research work objectives. As I said, they are the foundation of your research. So your research review must be done objective by objective. Then it must also include a comprehensive conceptual model showing all relevant constants or variables and their proposed what relationship. When you are writing your research review, also be guided by the fact that at the very end, you must have a conceptual model or framework that brings your research objectives together. And the variables of interest in each of the objectives are what are related. The research should also cite mutual effects in the field you are working, cite the most recent publications, cite publications that suggest different what viewpoint, and indicate how your research is what is also different from all the previous what studies. The research review should identify the gaps in existing what research and how your research is related and what will be is what is contribution. When you do the research review, at the very end, we expect you to have a heading, for instance, like summary of the literature and gaps identified. Having done all the literature review, what can you say are those gaps you have identified? And how can you those words? So you can mention gap one and how your research objective one will close that gap. Gap two, how your research objective two will close that particular gap. Then the reading must also be objective and reasonable when evaluating and commenting on the contributions of other words, researchers. So if in doubt, ask other words, knowledgeable individuals, less involved in your work to evaluate your comment. So setting to review the literature objectively and reasonably and make sure that your assessment of the contributions of each of the articles you are reviewing is objective. Okay, and it's very well and very clear. So this is the similar approach that we talked about in doing your literature work, your literature review. So you have your background. Why is your research topic so important? What research has been performed and what has been found out? Then you look on a specific area of interest to you. And normally these areas of interest to you are your research work objectives. Then look at current ideas and ideas in this area. And the previous series, how people use research objectives or have used what? Research hypothesis. That also gives you an idea as to which of them to what to use. Then key research questions that remain and how your research questions are going to what to fill in this gap of key research questions that are still remaining to be answered. What do we include in our literature review? In deciding what to include in our literature review, we have to ask certain questions. For instance, is the reference more than 10 years? If an article is more than 10 years, you may want to take it out from your literature review process. But as I said, some may accept even not up to 10 years. They only accept up to what? 5 years. Is the source reliable or potentially biased? The website or the journal that we are downloading the articles from to do your literature review, is that journal biased? Or you think that you cannot, this is not what reliable? If it's not reliable, don't use their articles to do your research. Because if you do so, what it means is that your research overall will not also be what? Reliable. Then has the reference been cited in other reliable and useful sources? Always try to get reliable articles to do your literature review because it enhances the reliability of your literature review as well. Beyond the theory, is the methodology useful as a guide to your approach? As we said, when you review the literature, you are reviewing literature not only on theories, but as well on what? Methodology, to see whether methodology used by author A can be suitable for your research as well or not. Can the topics included in the research you ask yourself this question, whether the articles you have read and how they have structured the topics in them. You can also structure your research in along that same along that same path. Which conclusions can be brought on and then need to be what? Need to be cited. What conclusions can you draw from the various articles that you have read? Okay, and which of the conclusions do you think need to be what? Cited in your literature review? So if the findings are different from your research, how do you deal with it? It is not a good idea to simply what? Not a good contradictory studies, since others such as research supervisors will often be interested in finding out how you were able to explain the differences between what you expect and what other researchers have already found. So don't say that you are expecting social networks to have influence on performance of employees. So all the literature that we are reviewing must say that no. Some may come up, you may come across some other articles that found that relationship to be what? To be non-existent, meaning there's no relationship between social networks and what? Employee performance. When you come across such articles, you have to report those what? You have to report those findings as well. And explain why probably they came out with that particular what? Or maybe how they arrived at those what? Conclusions. Maybe their sample size was high, or it was what? Small. This car with registration number NR186 2025. All right. Thank you. Okay, so if you come across a data that has conclusions that are different from what you expect, go ahead and report it. And try to explain why they arrive at those what? Contradictory what? Conclusions. Maybe the study area was in the US and you are looking at Africa. Maybe their sample size was more, and maybe others who have also different conclusions, their sample size was what? Was also different. So we have to try as much as possible to find reasons why those contradictory conclusions have emanated from their research works. From symptoms to research questions. When we are framing our research questions, we have to be mindful of the fact that there is a difference between what we see and what the real cause of what we are seeing may be. If employees within an organization are performing badly of late, the symptom is the poor performance. But the real issue that is causing the poor performance is what our interest should be. And so our research person should seek to unveil the real issue that is causing the what? That is causing the poor performance. And so we have a number of symptoms here and their potential issues and how we should frame our research questions. So for instance, there is no customer service ratings. Customers are rating our service as a company to be poor. So this low customer service rating is a symptom of something that we have to understand. And what would that potential issue be? It could be that sales representative territories are too large, or is not adequate for our salespersons. So they talk to customers anyhow, and customers rate the company low. And so the real issue is that there is no for our salespersons. And that is why the treatment of customers is so bad that the customers are giving our company low customer service rating. So we want to study that particular problem what research questions should be asked? What factors influence customer service what ratings? And so, as we try to answer this question, we'll come across training as a key factor that will probably be a factor influencing what customer service ratings. Again, let's say sales are lower than what expected in your organization. So that is a symptom. And so what may probably be the potential issue behind this symptom is that the focusing techniques are inadequate. In other words, from our business economics, we said that the manager must at any point be able to forecast the demand for the company's product into the future. If the focusing technique that the manager uses is not adequate enough, what it means is that he may either over forecast the demand or under forecast the demand. And when he does that, sales are going to be lower than expected. So you want to conduct a study to find out why sales are lower than expected. The research person to ask in that context will be what variables are the best predictors of what? Of sales. And we come across these focusing techniques as one of those what? Variables. So we have a number of symptoms, there are potential issues, and the research was questions to ask. Now, when we have our research topic, we develop our research problem. We said that our research questions must look for the research problem. So assuming we have this as our research questions, what then will be our research what? Objectives. Again, here we have to point out that depending upon the institution that you are doing your program, in some institutions, given their research guideline, the research questions come before the research what? Objectives. In some other institutions, the research objectives come before the research what? The research questions. In ours, I think our research questions normally come before our research what? Objectives. So that the objectives are seeking to answer the research what? The research questions. So how then do we transform our research questions into research what? Research objectives. For instance, what can be done to improve employees what? Employees' morale. That's the research question. The objective, which is to be an answer to that question, will be to identify influencing employee what? Employee morale. So this type of research question, perhaps this as is corresponding research what? Objectives. So essentially, this is also that when you have 4 research questions, then you must have 4 research what? Objectives. And each question must tally with its corresponding research objective. Where should we sell our products? That's our research question. Answer is
The cars are causing chaos.
another car.
Okay, GW.
GW 555
Kia. It's a
Kia.
Kia.
GW 5555. Please, the owner can help us. All right. So these are those research questions, and their corresponding research was objectives. So when you are doing your own study, you read your research questions, you have your research objectives, trying to answer each and every research question. All right. Questions? Now, the issue that we have identified as a relevance for conducting effective literature review is that it helps us to identify gaps. Okay, but what are these research gaps that our literature review can help us to identify? We have so many types of research gaps that our review of the literature can help us to identify. The first is evidence gap. The first is evidence gap. So taking you back to the pre-senior high school example, okay, we want to have evidence that most Ghanaian parents cannot pay for their wards. And so therefore, they need the help with the policy. What is that evidence? That evidence is not there. And that means it's a gap. Okay, it serves as an evidence what? We call that an evidence what? An evidence gap. So they are results from studies Results from studies allow for conclusions in their own right, but are contradictory when examined from a more abstract point of view. Or in other words, when you look at previous authors' research results, and you match that against some other results, sometimes they are some kind of what contradictions. And so we call that evidence, we call that too as what evidence was done. The two authors are all providing evidence to their research, but the evidence they are provided on the same issue are contradictory. So we call that evidence done. Then this knowledge is very similar to the evidence done. This one is just about our desired research finding not existing at all. So you that there are problems in the school, despite high level of or high sense of religiosity among the employees of that particular organization. There is a knowledge gap. He doesn't know what is that particular problem. And so we call that a knowledge gap. So it desires a research to be conducted to furnish the storekeeper with research findings that currently do not exist, to understand why he has that particular one, he's experiencing that particular problem. Then we have practical knowledge gap. Professional behavior or practices deviate from research what findings or are not covered by research. Within an organizational setting, where there's professional practice, sometimes the manager of the company wants to make a particular decision, and that practical decision cannot be made because there is a gap in knowledge. The company's manager keeps taking a particular course of action, and that particular course of action is contrary to what research findings suggest. Let's assume that for organizations to achieve high sense of employee performance, they must motivate those employees. That's what the literature says. But here is a manager who does not motivate employees and still wants the employees to put in their best in order to increase their level of performance. In that case, we say there is a practical knowledge gap. His conduct is contrary to what the research findings suggest. I think there's another problem.
Yes, somewhere, I don't know, the car blocked our way.
There's another car. Yes, the number.
Quadruple five.
55,
55.
555.
And 38.
That's why the exam on the opposite. Another gap is methodological gap. Another is methodological gap. You can go to different articles on a similar topic, but the methodology that they have adopted in studying that related topic, they are not strong. And that is a methodological gap. Let's say most of them are qualitative, and none of them is what? Quantitative. So we want to study the same problem by using quantitative approaches. Or they are all quantitative, and you want to do qualitative. So if they are all qualitative and quantitative, or the other it suggests a methodological gap. Then we have empirical gap. The theory of efficient market hypothesis says ABC about financial markets, how efficient financial markets are. But nobody has conducted a study, in the case of Ghana, for instance, to actually confirm or falsify what the theory of efficient market hypothesis proposes. In that case, there is an empirical gap. That is what the theory says. But nobody has used data to prove or disapprove what that particular theory says. And that becomes an empirical gap. Then we also have theoretical gap. As we said, you can take a number of articles on a topic that you want to conduct your research and realize that most of them have not used any theory. They just develop their topic, have their background and problem statements, their research objectives and questions. Then they carry on. They don't talk about any theory. That is a theoretical gap. So you want to use the theory of efficient market hypothesis to study the behavior of financial assets on the financial market. So that becomes your contribution to the world, to the literature, to put the theoretical gap by using a particular theory to study the same word, the same problem. Then we have population what? Population gap. Sometimes a particular research may be conducted very similar to yours, but the sample size is 30. And so you want to look at a sample size of 300 because you feel that the sample size of the previous author was not adequate enough. And so you feel there was a population gap. And so you want to conduct a similar research, but in your case, you want to have a sample size of what? 300 instead of what? 30. Any questions? Yes. 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 So as I said, every institution has its guidelines for writing dissertation and thesis. So in the guideline, they will suggest to you that when you are writing your literature review chapter, don't use articles more than what? 5 years. Or your supervisor can tell you that. Or you can just say that I want my literature review to be current. So any literature beyond 5 years, I will not what? Use it. As I said, it's in your own interest as a researcher to do so, as that will convey the message to the readers that your research is current and it has gone through the recent development, or review literature on the recent development in the area you are conducting your study. Okay. Yes. Yes. Most of them will be 5 years, not more than 5 years. However, some research articles that have to do with theories. Those theories probably were propounded in 1940s. For those research articles, they are accepted. This time range does not affect those research articles. Because if you want to use the social learning theory, and the theory was propounded in 1978, you cannot say that you use that theory, because that is what your research must be grounded on. And so if that is the case, and you have to use that theory, then you have to use a paper that proposes that particular theory, irrespective of the age of that particular paper. So for theories, conceptual definitions, any article that is based on any of these, the time may not apply to that one. Yes. 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 If the research article you want, so you look for the new ones. I understand your question. Let me put it that way and see whether another way and see whether that's what you asked for. So we are saying that if you are conducting a study and you are looking at what to write your literature review chapter, and you have gathered all the literature that you need or the articles that you need to do your literature, and you realize that you don't have enough, and the little that you have, they are all old. Maybe in that case, your use of this old literature will be what? Will be justified. Yes. 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 What is the intent of the research? Current research work. So it will either be, so you see, when we conduct research, it's more or less a product as time goes on. So you are looking at social networks and employee performance. Somebody comes to look at social networks and job satisfaction, and employee performance. The person is on your previous research work. So it goes up like that. So if you want to do any study that is bringing something new, some new finding, then it's likely to either be either an evidence gap or an empirical gap. Or it may also be a theoretical gap. What people say is I'm use theories and I'm arrived at certain conclusions. In your case, you have to use a theory to see whether you arrive at the same conclusion in terms of the relationship between social networks and employee what performance. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. So it comes in the problem statement. It comes in the problem what statement. And that is why after you write your problem statement, you end that problem statement normally with your research topic. Okay, so we talk about the gaps at the tail end of your problem statement, and then you slot in your research topic. It is within this context that this particular study intends to then you state your research topic. So we are telling the reader that it is within the context of these gaps, with some of these gaps, that your research intends to do A, B, or C. Yes. Yes.
Can you still repeat the same research topic? That's the student, maybe you identify the first researcher, maybe a problem you was searching by them and you want to research it.
But there must be a justification for it. So based on these gaps, you can replicate a study. Somebody has already conducted a study. You can repeat that same study, but it has to be justified. Maybe there was a theoretical gap. You are now introducing a theory. Maybe the population size, the sample size was too small. You are increasing it. So you have to have a justification to do so. Even though that is normally discouraged, but you can still do that. Once you are able to identify these gaps that your research will close. All right.
Like what you say, maybe the person see that he won't do the research. It refers to a different organization. And you are also doing different.
In that case, there are two different. The topic may be the same, but the geographical setting may vary, or the place organization may vary. Yes, we can still do that. But at this level of the masters, that is not totally encouraged. To just pick the same topic and change only the name of the organization and replicate that. It's a gap, it's a geographical gap. Because we have to find out how it pertains to a different area. Normally, it is better to add certain other gaps to make your case to justify adequately the reason why you are conducting that study. Maybe outside the geographical gap, there is a theoretical gap and a population gap. That will make your motivation for the study very strong. Yes? Yes, so your research topic should seek to close one or more of these gaps. Okay. If you are looking at organizational attrition, or let's say employee turnover rates, the rate at which employees are leaving the organization, you may be interested in looking at the factors that are responsible for that. So the research topic will be determinants of turnover rates, high turnover rates, okay, among some of a particular organization. That will be your research topic. And in doing that research, you have to identify which of these following gaps that your literature review revealed to you that in doing your study will close that particular gap. All right. Thanks so much for coming. And you see Prof next week by God's grace. Have a wonderful time.
Yeah. in